there, guys. Today I'm gonna be reading you Psycho by Robert Bloch. There's gonna be some soft reading so you can fall asleep to it. Yeah, enjoy. When Norman Bates heard the voice, and a shock went through him. It sounded as though somebody was tapping on the window pane. He looked up, hesitantly, half prepared to rise, and the book slid from his hand to his arm-pile lap. Then he realized that the sound was merely rain, late afternoon rain, striking the window. Norman hasn't noticed the coming of the rain, nor the twilight, but it was quite dim there in the parlor now, and he reached over to switch the lamp before resuming his reading. It was one of those old-fashioned table lamps, the kind which the ornate glass shade and the crystal fringe. Mother had it ever since she could remember, and she refused to get rid of it. Norman didn't really object. He had lived in this house for all the 40 years of his life, and there was something quite pleasant and reassuring about surrounded by familiar things. Here everything was ordinarily or it was only there, outside, that the changes took place, and most of those changes held a potential threat. Suppose he had spent the afternoon walking, for example. He might have been off on some lonely side of road, or even the swamps, when the rain came. And then what? He'd be soaked to the skin, forced to stumble along home in the dark. You could catch your death of cold that way. And besides, who wanted to be out in the dark? It was much nicer here in the parlor, under the lamp, with a good book for a company. The light shone down on his plump face, reflected from the grimless glasses, bathed the pinkness of his scalp, the thinning sandy hair, as he bent his head to resume reading. It was really a fascinating book. No wonder he hadn't noticed how fast the time had passed. It was The Realm of Ansez by Victor W. Von Hagen. And Norman had never before encountered such a wealth of curious information. For example, the description, the Kakua, or victory dance, where the warrior formed a great circle, moving and riding like a snake. He read, the drumbeat for this was unusual. The drumbeat for this was usually performed on what had been the body of an enemy. The skin had been flayed and the belly stretched to form a drum, and the whole body acted as around a sound box, while throbbing came out the open mouth, grotesque but effectively. Norman smiled that he allowed himself the luxury of the comfortable shiver. The grotesque but effective. It was certainly must have been. Imagine flaying a man alive, probably, and stretching his belly to use it as a drum. How did they actually go about doing that? Curing, preserving the flesh of the corpse to prevent decay. For that matter, what kind of mentality did it take to convince of such an idea in the first place? It wasn't the most appetizing nation in the world, but when Norman has half-closed eyes, he could almost see the scene. This throng of painted naked warriors wriggling, and the old crone crouching before them, throbbing out unrelentless rhythm on the swollen, distantly belly of a caviter. The controlled mouth of the corpse would be forced to open, probably fixed in a gaping grimace by clamps of the bone, and from it sounded emerged beating of the belly rising through the shrunken inner orphans, forced up through the wither windpipe and enraged, amplified in the full force of the dead throat. For a moment, Norman could almost hear it, and then he actually remembered the rain has its rhythm too, and the footsteps. Actually, he was aware of the footsteps without even hearing them. Long familiarity aided his sense whenever mother came into his room. He didn't even have to look up to know she was there. In fact, he didn't look up. He pretended to continue reading instead. Mother had been sleeping in her room, and he knew how crabby she could get when just awakened. So it was best to keep quiet and hope that she wasn't in one of her bad moods. Norman, do you know what time it is? He said. He sighed and closed the book. He could tell now she was going to be difficult. The question was challenging. Mother had to pass the grandfather's clock in the hall in order to come in here, and she could easily see the time it was. Still, no sense making an issue of it. Norman glanced down at his wristwatch, then smiled a little. After 5, he said, I actually didn't realize it was so late. I've been reading. Don't you think I have eyes? she said. I can see what you've been doing. She was at the window now, staring at the rain. And then I can see what you haven't been doing too. Why didn't you turn the sign on the when it got dark? And why aren't you up at the office where you belong? Well, it started to rain so hard, and I didn't expect there'd be any traffic in this kind of weather. Nonsense. That's just the time you're likely to get some business. Lots of folks don't care to drive when it's raining, but it isn't like anybody would be coming this way. Everyone takes the new highway. Norman heard the bitterness in her voice. Felt it welling up into his throat, until he could taste it and tried to hold it back. But by the time when we got that advanced step that they were moving the highway, you could have sold the motel. Then, before there was a public announcement about the new roads coming, we could have bought all kinds of land over there for a song, closer to farewell too. We'd had a new motel, a new house, made some money, but you wouldn't listen. You never listen to me, do you? It's always you. It's always what you want, what you think. You make me sick. Do I, boy? Mother's voice was desperately gentle, but that didn't fool Norman. Not when she called him boy. 40 years old, and she called him boy. That's how she treated him too, which it made it worse. If only he have to listen. But when he did, he knew he had to always had to listen. Do I, boy? She repeated, even more softly. I make you sick, eh? Well, I think not. No, boy. I don't make you sick. You make yourself sick. That's the real reason you're still sitting over here on this side of road. Isn't it, Norman? Because the truth is that you haven't any gumption, never had any gumption, did you, boy? That's gonna be it for today.